Hi, good morning and welcome to the ZP Developer Zone. I can see that Nick is online already and I know he's very keen to discuss glucose sensors. So hi Ali, nice to see you this morning. Hopefully there's a lag between live and going live, but here we are. Alright, so every Thursday at 8 a.m. London time we like to do a webinar for the members of our ZP Developer Zone. So thank you Ali and Nick, nice to see you this morning. So let me just essentially dive straight into it. You know, we show this slide every week. We have the ZP Academy, and I'm probably going to mention the ZP Academy this week because people who are interested in biosensors and continuous glucose measurements, the ZP Academy is probably a good place to head to if you haven't already been there, but we'll mention that in a bit. We do the webinars every Thursday at 8 a.m. and here we are. We also do a webinar for the news on Sundays. We do collaborations with our ZP Developer Zone members, and we also have jobs and there's the ZP Developer Zone. I was keen to do a workshop, but I'm now wondering, you know, we seem to be entering this lockdown situation again, so this is going to be a little bit trickier, but we'll see what comes about. So let me dive straight into it. Hi Aftab, nice to see you this morning. Aftab, I've got some really material that's very relevant to you. So we had a couple of questions. One of them was placed by T Kaka, which is, and I'll get to that in a minute. And the other one was extended questions from Nick, who's online this morning. So we'll deal with the request here, and then we'll answer these questions, let's say here. So the inquirer has asked, so if you're a member of the ZP Developer Zone, you'll see in the forum that the inquirer has said, can I have some samples of these screen printed electrodes? Now I think the inquirer is actually, or the member is actually in India, so I just want to kind of flag it up to Aftab. And they are interested in getting some, let's say, free samples of these screen printed electrodes. Now, I will say here that ZP can give electrodes for free. We would do it only for academics. We wouldn't do it for commercial organizations. I mean, ZP is a commercial organization. It would be a bit strange for one commercial organization to sort of give, you know, charity to another organization. But we will give it to academics for free, but there are some let's say there are some conditions. We will charge for shipping. So if you have managed to make a case to ZP for some, let's say, free screen printed electrodes, we will charge you for shipping. And shipping can be, you know, to be frank, you know, these days it's not like it used to be. I mean, shipping at the moment is actually quite expensive, so be careful. So ZP will give, let's say, free electrodes for people trying to do immunosensors and trying to build immunosensors, especially on these hyper value electrodes. I mean, these hyper value electrodes, you know, they're 99 cents each, so you can see that it's not so hard to give them for free, but we will charge for shipping. And also, if you're in India, then you do have to contact Technando and actually speak to them, and it'll have to kind of be with the blessing of Technando that we do this or not. So we can do it. We will charge usually for the shipping, and it really has to come via Technando because, you know, they're our representatives in India, and, you know, it has to kind of have their, let's say, blessing on this. And then lastly, and this is really importantly, I'm just going to give you a case study of a of somebody that we did give free electrodes to. Now the inquirer is saying, can I have some free electrodes for an immunoassay? This was a group of students in the USA, and they were trying to do a sepsis sensor. So I really think it was an immunoassay, immunosensor type. Now they did ask us for the electrodes, and we did give them to them. They did pay for shipping, but this is what they did for us, which was really important for us at ZP. They were actually kind enough to actually put them into their promotional material. So in some ways, you know, if somebody's going to have, let's say, free electrodes from ZP, we would like to be, we would like some sort of, material to help us, talk about the company, or we would like to be, acknowledged on the paper, or in some cases we'd actually like to be, industrial supervisors of the work as well. So it's really important. So if ZP is going to, give screen-printed electrodes, we will give them, but we want some sort of involvement. If you can help us promote the electrodes, that's great. If we can be acknowledged on the papers, that's great. If we can be, let's say, supervisors on the project, and if that's an option, then we'd also like to consider that as well. So the answer is we will give these electrodes, but especially in India, you do have to start. The starting point is speak to Technando. Now to a whole series of questions that we got from Nick. I'm speaking rather fast because I always say that this webinar starts at 8 a.m. London time. In less than an hour, I actually have to be getting on a train to go to London, so I'm talking fast. Right. So the first question that came through now, all these questions are linked to CGM, continuous glucose monitoring. So they plan to develop a prototype sensor for doing probably analysis of glucose in sweat. They will want to do the electronics themselves. Now their first question is the part number that's in the data sheet didn't match up with any of our glucose sensors. So what I've done is I've actually done a revision of the data sheet. So if you now go to our glucose page and look at our data sheets, you will find now that I've corrected that. So you will find the right, let's say, glucose sensor called out in the data sheet. So hopefully that's fixed that. Thank you for spotting it, and we have repaired it. Or I have repaired it. Now the next one is a little trickier. Any documents that we have that link sweat glucose to, let's say, blood glucose, and that is if anyone's going to develop a sweat glucose sensor, their biggest risk is it the engineering? No. Is it the sensor? No. Is it the clinical risk? And by clinical risk, is there actually a strong correlation between sweat glucose and blood glucose? And the answer is, I don't think anyone really knows, to be honest with you. I'll give you a case study. This is the Google contact lens for measuring glucose. This is a technology that started off, I think, from possibly Washington State University. It was definitely picked up by Microsoft, and eventually it found its little home for a while at Google, because Google has a research division called Google X, and they picked it up. Now they no longer run with this technology, and the reason they don't run with it is because the whole principle was you put a contact lens in your eye, it will measure the fluid in the eye, and they will measure the glucose in that fluid. The problem they had was that there was very poor correlation between what they were measuring in the eye and what the blood glucose was. And I have talked about the analysis of glucose in sweat, but I always say it's very unproven whether there is strong correlation between sweat and blood glucose. So if you're trying to make a sensor that's kind of for health and wellness, you can do this. But if you're trying to make a sensor where you are trying to correlate with blood glucose and help type 1 and type 2 diabetics, you've got a very, very long uphill battle for this, because it's not just making a CGM. You then have to clinically prove what you're doing is actually clinically useful. And the case study would be the Google contact lens. I'm not saying sweat and the eye are the same fluid. Of course I'm not saying that, but I would say they definitely have tried, and they definitely had to stop. So I would definitely warn you against this. But that's for you. The next question here is about electronics, where you reference a load cell. So I'm not really quite understanding the question, but I would say this. I mean, at ZP we do have, obviously, I know you say, Nick, we'll take care of the electronics. I mean, the idea at ZP is we're actually going to end up producing electronics at such a low cost that it's going to make the need to develop own electronics kind of not really necessary. What I would suggest was, I'm just going to go to the ZP Academy. If you want to maybe explore what electrons you need. We have a couple of free courses in here, and I suspect have an enrollment of these. I've got a suspicion that electrochemical techniques for biosensor developers will talk about amperometry. The kind of circuit you need, Nick, is you need to be able to apply a voltage of 650 millivolts between the working and reference, and you need to be able to measure a current between the working and counter. And if you want some deeper insight into this, then you probably look at course 2A1. We do have, let's say, other courses that are kind of are relevant to people doing CGM. I just don't talk about them so much because so there's an introduction to generation 1 glucose sensors here, which is probably relevant. There's also one on introduction to technology and manufacturing of commercial glucose strips, which is probably worth a look at as well. Commercialization of CGM is probably worth a look at there as well. So we do have some courses, and I don't often talk about them because the two that are free, please use them, read them. The other ones are very expensive, and the reason they're very expensive is because some of the, let's say, when I sit here and talk about, CGM, continuous glucose monitoring, it's been like 20 years to get to this point. Yeah, so Nick here is asking, if sweat is not able to detect accurately, what would you suggest or our path? Yeah, okay, that's a different question. So let me finish answering. So Nick's just asked a different question, so I will answer that as well. So he's asking here, what's the shelf life of the sensor? It's a slightly different answer here, but these sensors should last 18 months on the shelf. In continuous usage, we've been using these sensors for over 125 days. So they're pretty robust. Nick asks if they send us a CAD design, will we do a custom manufacture of it? We will. I'm also going to put a link under this video later on, which says, the problem with customization is, I have a page on our website which is called "What's Wrong with R&D Screen Printed Electrodes." So what's wrong with R&D screen printed electrodes? It's probably worth Googling that term. The reason I bring it up is because whenever you do customization, it's always expensive, and because it's quite low volume, it doesn't have the quality that people actually want. So I always think it's better not to go customization. It's actually better to stay on standard products, because standard products have higher volumes of manufacture and the quality is higher. Therefore, when you go customization, you have to pay for all the engineering costs. Then you only produce, let's say, 500 sensors, and that's really a low volume manufacturer. I'm just going to read what Ali says here. The idea of using a contact lens for a biomarker analysis was really innovative at the time. Yeah, he is right. At the time, it was definitely innovative. The problem now is, it's got to be clinically useful as well. I would say a contact lens is probably useful for measuring conditions of the eye. So, if I think there's a condition of the eye called glaucoma, for example. So if you had a contact lens that measured glaucoma or relieved glaucoma, that's probably useful. And I've also just noticed that Tarun Kaka is online as well. So Ali and Tarun, it's probably worth linking up, guys, because I think it's Taran that was asking the questions about getting some free hypervalue electrodes. So guys, it's probably worth linking up at some point. So Nick was asking about customization. Yes, we will do it. It is expensive, and I'm worried about the quality because of the low volume. Nick was also asking about. Nick was also asking about the battery life. He was saying things like 2 years. I mean, our batteries on our Easy Flex, we have these little thin sort of pouch batteries. They're very thin, very small. They only last about 18 hours, so I just want to give you a quick heads up on that. Hi Hitcham, nice to see you this morning. I just want to read a quick comment that Ali's put up there. I think sweat is the best biological fluid due to its nature. If you could solve the correlation issue. So yeah, so Ali is saying, like, if you can solve it, Nick, and that's a correlation between sweat and blood glucose, you're really onto a winner. But I'm not going to underestimate how hard that is. And then Nick here is asking what's the accuracy level. So let me just dive into a slightly different slide now and say, what we're discussing here in this kind of in this webinar is the idea that you have some electronics patch. This is our Easy Flex. You have a glucose sensor, and you've managed to put that sensing head in contact with the sweat. Now, when people ask me about, what's the accuracy, there's lots of ways of looking at accuracy. What they're saying is, how well does it correlate with the truth? So and therefore, how well do you hit the bullseye? And what I would say is, don't mix up precision with accuracy. That we can have very precise sensors, but if you were trying to measure glucose in the sweat and correlate it with glucose in the blood, our sensors could be precise, but we might not be accurately measuring what's actually going in the blood, because the sensor's not in the blood. The sensor's actually in the sweat. So when you ask me what's the accuracy of our EC Flex glucose system, then in vitro, i.e. I make up take some buffer in the lab and I put some glucose into it, then we're going to be, really accurate. If you ask me, how accurate would your sensor be if you're measuring glucose in the sweat? How accurate would it be with correlation to the blood? And the answer is, we don't know. And that's actually a really tricky thing to work out. I suspect that we would be better if you asked us how well we were sort of measuring the glucose in the sweat, but the answer is, the problem with that is we could be very accurate with measuring glucose in the sweat, but if it's not well correlated with glucose in the blood, then you're going to have a real clinical battle to actually get that approved. So Nick asked a different question, guys, which was, well, if you don't suggest measuring the sweat, what would you suggest? So I'll just change tack slightly. I'm just going to say it very quickly. Possibly microneedles, Nick. There's a company called I forgot. I think they're called BioLink. They're in San Diego. The name of the company's just slipped my memory for a second here. But they've just received $100 million to do this. So I think microneedles would probably be your best option. Now, my only comment about microneedles is you will be competing against companies, that have been funded to $100 million. So you're gonna have a real battle on your hands in terms of technology. But yeah. Ali just made a very interesting comment. Actually, I think he's correct. He's absolutely correct. Actually, the quickest way to be able to correlate sweat glucose with blood glucose is probably artificial intelligence. It is a very powerful technique. We do use it a lot, and I think it's a smart suggestion actually. Hi Ahmet, nice to see you this morning. So I'm still speaking very fast because I still need to catch that train, but let me just say this. Our glucose sensors are very accurate in vitro, but when you put them on the sweat and you try to then say, how accurate are they relative to blood glucose, that's unknown to us, and that's a real, let's say, battle. Yeah, and Ali's saying, Ali's agreeing with me, microneedles are a good idea. So let me summarize like this. So it's great that Tarun's online now. Tarun, we did dedicate the start of this video to you, and as I say, and I know you've acknowledged it, I would talk to Ali, who's Aftab. Make sure I say Aftab. Make sure you speak to Aftab about what you're wanting to do, and then Aftab will talk to us and we'll see what we can do there. And Nick, I know you had 7 questions. They were very detailed. It's worth taking a look at that contact lens that Glucose did and Google did, and sort of saying, if they weren't successful, will I be successful? And if you do carry on this path, I think I got a feeling, I've looked at your website because you're a commercial organisation. I think you probably would be quite good at AI by the looks of your website, so I would suggest that. So what I'm going to do is, and I think microneedles would be a good idea as well. I am going to unfortunately wrap up, but I mean, Nick's here this morning, so thanks very much for that. Ali's been here, Aftab's been here, Hasim has been here this morning, Tarun has come online, Hitcham has been here, Ahmet has been here, so it's been a really good turnout this morning, guys. Very appreciate it. Don't forget, if you have any questions, post them on the forum. Yeah, and really thanks very much for coming along this morning. I'll post this video probably in the next 24 hours. It's just I literally am gonna stop this, get on a train, go to London, so I do have to jump. Otherwise, take care, guys, and I will speak to some of you on Sunday and see some of you next Thursday. Otherwise, take care, look after yourselves, and have a nice weekend when it comes. All right, take care, bye-bye.